Hey everyone, George here, the Disney Family Man, coming to you with another video. And today I got a dear friend to the channel that's back on again for another in-depth conversation. I have VashSky with me. How are you today, sir?
Hello there, sir. Great to be back. Thank you for having me back. I'm really
Absolutely.
excited.
We've been having some good conversations, so I thought let's keep the ball rolling here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe even some updates on our last conversation at the very end there. I think that'll be really nice.
Yes, absolutely. So I thought today we'd talk about something that I think needs to be talked about because I think a lot of people kind of take this park as sort of like being misunderstood. Like a lot of people don't really understand the concept of this park and how it originated and where it's going. And I think we need to give this park some love. And I think you and I can both agree on it that out of all the four parks at Walt Disney World, Epcot is the one that needs to have a spotlight on it for a time or two because like for the longest time that it's one of those things that I think nowadays that people say, well, if I had to pick a park that I didn't want to go on my Disney vacation, which one would I let go? 9 out of 10 times people would leave go of Epcot. And I think it's very misunderstood, and I think it's a park that stands the test of time and actually has a pretty good storyline as far as the history goes for it.
It's the history of Epcot is incredible. I mean, the reason Walt Disney World exists at all is because of Epcot. Its importance to the kind of Walt Disney story, the company story, in the history of the company. I mean, it can't be understated. This was a huge endeavor, amazingly ambitious, even in its final form. And yeah, I do agree. It needs a little love. Needs a little. Well, let's circle let's circle back on this one, and then let's see what's going on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's starting like in the very beginning. I was watching a lot of like the your host Walt Disney specials and a lot of the uh, documentary type things where Walt Disney's talking to the audience, where he's involving the people into the Florida Project, or also known as Project X, where it's one of those things where not a whole lot of people really knew about it until it was discovered by the media that hey, Disney was buying these large parcels of land in Central Florida, and they were using like tomahawk properties and different like alias names because the second they were to know it was Walt Disney, that price would have skyrocketed from I don't even I forget how much it actually cost per acre, but I think it would have jumped significantly.
Oh, they got it for a song and dance, from what I understand. You could look up the facts and figures on it, but I mean, they got it for substantially less than anybody would have been willing to part with it had they known it was a Disney company actually doing it. There's actually a tribute to the kind of show corporations that they had set up on Main Street itself in the Magic Kingdom. So that's kind of a tribute to that process. I mean, this was Walt Disney World itself was hugely ambitious. This was the largest private construction project that had ever been undertaken by any company in the history of the world at that time. So, I mean, it was a hugely ambitious endeavor. And, unfortunately, Walt never got to see it. But, I mean, do not be misled. This was absolutely huge. So they knew they needed just a huge portion of land to pull it all off, and they just couldn't risk, sellers jacking up the price, and not being able to acquire the land that they needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like where I'm going to kind of continue on from that is that a lot of people think that Walt Disney World was just going to be an East Coast version of Disneyland. You know, Walt just wanted to create another theme park where even though the Magic Kingdom is highly very popular, it's out of all four parks, it's the most popular park in the resort, and everyone can resonate with the castle and the central hub and the many lands, and that's essentially what happened with Disneyland Park that started the whole theme park phenomenon. But in Walt's eyes, Walt Disney World for him was a bigger project of living quarters, of having new kind of futuristic technology and ways of transportation. And that's what Epcot was more so going to be. It was supposed to be a futuristic living quarters for people who wanted to reside in that Orlando area. And that's where essentially with the People Mover, the People Mover was supposed to go around the whole entire perimeter of that section where they wouldn't need like cars and everything. It's just, you jump on the People Mover, it takes you either to the working district or the residential district, and that's what Epcot was going to be. It wasn't going to be a theme park.
Right. No, I mean, Epcot was really never envisioned to be a theme park. That was very, very late in its development cycle. When Walt had he had one foot in the past, one foot in the future, and he really wanted to see, he wanted to see, progress, as Carousel of Progress would say. I mean, he really wanted to advance the human condition as best as much as he could. He started with, the first kind of urban planning was Disneyland. It was the central hub. It was a lot of the characteristics that you see in Disneyland. Really, I mean, that's him testing out, hey, look, can we make the kind of themed amusement industry better? Can we take some of the ideas that we've developed for Disneyland and really turn them and make them into areas of city planning and so forth? Carousel Progress was, probably the kind of the vision that he had going forward. And the reason I say that is because above Carousel Progress out in Disneyland, there was a section where you could see Progress City. And Progress City was really the template for, this is where I want to go in terms of city planning, urban development, and so forth. And he was kind of obsessed with it. He had a book, and I can't recall the name of it, but it was this kind of urban planning book. And it had all these ideas and details of what the kind of the best layout for a city could be. And he really kind of, poured over it, and really, he took some ideas, had some ideas of his own. The People Mover itself was an integral part of that. I mean, that's why it makes an appearance in Disneyland the way it does, is because that was the blueprint for doing kind of inner city transportation, transporting you to there. That was the monorail. I mean, this was a very ambitious idea that he had. And from what I understand, I mean, he went on his deathbed that the last thing he saw was really the vision of Epcot that he wanted it to be. I mean, this was extremely important to him. And he just kept saying, man, if I just had 10 more years, oh my gosh, the things I could have done, the things I could do, the things I could, that I could be accomplished. It was truly fascinating.
It really is. And it even brings me back to a point where I kind of asked myself this question that, us as Disney fans, we lost Walt, I think, at a very young age. Yeah, I know he could have gone on for another 20, 30 some years. And it just dawns on me every single time I bring that up is, what really would we have up till now if he had another 30 years, of what he would have created, what Epcot really would have looked like, what Walt Disney World would have looked like.
Vastly different. I mean, we think of Walt Disney World as the kind of the vacation kingdom come to life, but really, I mean, the plans for Epcot were so much more ambitious than just themed entertainment. I mean, he really wanted to have a city, and it really, with the Reedy Creek Improvement District, it's kind of interesting because it kind of usurps the U.S. Constitution in a way, because it's really, they have their own kind of government out there where they can
pretty much
have their own zoning, they can pass their own regulatory, they have their own regulatory body, they can pass their own licenses and so forth. It's a pretty crazy setup. They can have a nuclear power plant on the site. It's a very interesting setup if you look into it, but regardless, I mean, it's kind of interesting because Walt Disney World in totality is really it's almost like a living city in itself, right? I mean, it produces its own power. It has its own population, its own citizens that kind of run it. It has its own transportation kind of apparatus, which is extremely complex. So it kind of it almost kind of became that. But no, this was going to be, Epcot was going to be the city of the future. And there's one of the last pieces of film that Disney ever made an appearance in. For it was supposed to be only for corporate executives and shareholders, but in that piece, which you can probably find on YouTube pretty easily, it goes into Epcot. It goes into the kind of construction of Epcot, how Epcot was laid out. You know, the urban industrial core in the center, radiating out like it very much hub and spoke, similar to what they eventually did with the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland, radiating out the residences that surround it, like the people mover, you know, transportation apparatus that you know transports people all over the different various areas of Epcot. And you have this it's kind of layered, so it has a complex transportation system to allow for shipping, monorail traffic, and car traffic. I mean, it was stunning. This was pretty intense. And unfortunately, when Walt died, as much as the Imagineers wanted to bring that vision to life, there was just no appetite for it really on the corporate level. And without Walt to kind of get companies on board to kind of make this thing a reality, it just never really had the chance that it probably deserved. And so they really had to change it up. I mean, you know, Walt wanted it. There were certain executives that wanted to bring it to life, but you know, Walt was the general, and he had a bunch of great lieutenants, and unfortunately, you know, it just couldn't get off the ground.
Yeah. And it's also to the fact, going back to what you said about like the Reedy Creek development and everything, it's sort of like of a past conversation that you and I had, and also with Orange Grove, that the issues that California with Disneyland's going on with right now is with the zoning and everything. And Walt Disney World doesn't have to have that problem, because it's basically everything. I'm quoting Mufasa here. Everything the light touches is our kingdom. So it's like,
right.
I know.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, they have the power to do pretty much whatever they want on Walt Disney World property. Now, with that being said, this was the kind of there was an environmentalist kind of culture rising, and they have dedicated a lot of the space on Walt Disney World to greenery and to maintaining that environment. So they can't do anything. And that's why people ask, well, they can just, I have so much land, they can do whatever they want. Well, when you factor in sinkholes and what's actually usable space, what they've actually dedicated for as zones that they've kind of agreed to, that must protect them for the environment, they can't do quite everything they want to. They still have to have some green space and so forth. It's kind of interesting because we talked about shell corporations earlier in buying land. Well, apparently that's what's going on in Anaheim right now. So, you know, history, it rhymes, you know, what's old is new again, kind of, so to speak. So it's very, very interesting.
Tale as old as time. So, so, but it's like one of those things, even with the people mover, that a lot of people, when they go inside the Magic Kingdom and they see the people mover, they just look at it as, oh, it's another attraction we can go on. You know, we'll take a ride through the tour of Tomorrowland, go inside and see the backstage area of each attraction. You come off of it and they say, oh, it's a nice little joyride. Well, it's more so that if you really see the history behind that attraction, that it wasn't even supposed to be an attraction in a theme park. That was supposed to be the main mode of transportation for this futuristic city that Walt was building.
Right. And Walt he loved transportation. He loved the kind of technologies that were emerging at the time. A lot of different things, you know, coming out of World War II, a lot of that technology that was implemented and used and was becoming declassified. A lot of technological gains were being made because of, you know, NASA's efforts to get into space and get to the moon. So a lot of that technology was rising out, and he was just fascinated with it. He just was obsessed with it. And what was really amazing about Walt was he wasn't just thinking about what could be used in the theme park space. He was like, wow, how could these technologies be used to improve our lives? and it was truly fascinating. If you look at the People Mover back at Disneyland, obviously it was kind of a ride to showcase different areas of Tomorrowland, kind of a similar way with how they used it in Magic Kingdom. But he was very much thinking the People Mover was a perfect concept to be used to transport people around Epcot. And that was one of the big problems about urban planning at the time, was there was great solutions for long range transportation, but not for short range. And that the People Mover was that concept. You look at the monorail, and he didn't see it as a ride. He saw it as transportation. The first thing he did when given the chance was transport people from Tomorrowland to the Disneyland Hotel, because he wanted to have that transportation it be actually used. He tried to convince the city of Los Angeles and California to pick up the People Mover. The monorail concept for transportation there, and they were this close, and they said no. I bet you they wish they had that now. The People Mover, Imagineers pitched the People Mover to multiple different areas to try to get it to be technology that could be that was used and adopted in multiple different venues and platforms. They had a number of airports that were looking into adopting the technology, and that never really happened, which was really unfortunate. But these concepts, I'm telling you guys, I mean, they were not only were they ambitious, but they were practical.
And if you actually look at the transportations even now in the resorts, that they tell a story, whether that it has to do with the theme parks or not. It's like everything is so interconnected that when it comes to like the monorail, or even the new Skyliner that was put up recently at Walt Disney World, it's like it tells a story of, it's not just for themed to go to a theme park, that this was a bigger plan, a bigger vision for Walt than just a simple, okay, let's take the family on vacation sort of thing.
Exactly. Walt was never really, he wasn't interested in the Walt Disney World site as a kind of an outgrowth of what it eventually became, which was the Vacation Kingdom. He was very much interested in, I want to do this experimental prototype Community of Tomorrow. I want to bring this Epcot plan, this Progress City, to life. And that was really the goal, the number one goal for Walt Disney. Obviously there is kind of a reality where, okay, well, we have to kind of fund projects. There are certain design elements that we have to incorporate, like a kind of a Magic Kingdom style park, but really the focus, the real core of it was on Epcot. And eventually we did get Epcot, but in a different form, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much, because after Walt passed, they all wanted to have sort of like this. They didn't want to stop, and they had to convince his brother and business partner Roy that we should keep going forth with the project. The Imagineers, the executives of the company, and what have you, that they said we should still move forward with the Florida project. And it started out with the Magic Kingdom, and that's how even they adopted the I believe it's called the AVAC system, even like where the trash compactor would suck up all the garbage, and that was supposed to be implemented in Epcot as well. And it's just one of those things, like even it's small subtleties that when you say, oh, they have this or this at the park, well, this was going to be a much bigger, ambitious project. But as you said, with their leader and the general, so to speak, of gone out of the picture, that it's like, well, what can we do to kind of represent him of what he stood for and what he wanted? And despite that Epcot isn't what it was supposed to be, they kind of took the two implements of what Epcot was all about, which is the futuristic side of the community, and also that would kind of bind everyone together, like from people from around the world of culture and history. And it's like they had two models, one for Future World and one for World Showcase, and they didn't know which one to really pick. And it's to my knowledge that they took both models, pushed them together, and that essentially became Epcot.
Yeah, it's the Marty Sklar story, right?
Yeah,
Where it's just like, hey, we have kind of the future world that kind of represents kind of Epcot's progress, but then the community that is represented in World Showcase, bring them together, and boom, you got a great concept. Oh no, I mean, you know, we, Magic Kingdom. I mean, still, we think, oh well, they never did Epcot. Well, as Magic Kingdom was extremely ambitious just in itself, like you said, the utilidors, the trash collection system. I mean, these concepts had never been really been realized on that scale before, and that really is an accomplishment to the Imagineers, the ambition of the time. Roy was very safe, right? I mean, he wanted, hey, look, let's not go swinging for Epcot first. Let's build the theme park. Let's get kind of enough money under our belt so that we can maybe bring Epcot to life, and that's why Magic Kingdom rose out of the ground from that. I will say, there was a lot of quotes at that time that said stuff like, well, every urban planner should be calling up Imagineering for their cities and towns, because they're the ones that can actually get it done. They're the ones that could actually get it to work in a way that no urban planner had ever done before in the past, which was really profound. It was a really profound statement to be made there. I mean, if you think about it, you did have monorails going from resort to resort to resort. The Polynesian, the Contemporary, binding those all together to the TTC and then to Magic Kingdom. You did have a kind of a transportation apparatus growing out of that. And then when it came to Epcot, it was, all right, well, we're trying to get the city, but it just never kind of fell into place. The second best thing was, let's bring a lot of those best elements, a lot of these kind of futuristic elements that really improve the human condition. Let's take the best of those and place it in kind of a theme park setting. So that's kind of what kind of Epcot, or at that point Epcot Center was. It was the theme park, and it was named Epcot Center because they kind of still had the idea, oh well, if this is extremely successful, maybe we could do the city and this is the center of it. So they were still thinking like, hey, maybe we can bring what Walt wanted to life in some way. But no, I mean, Epcot Center, as it was known back then, even that was extremely ambitious. Look, this thing was budgeted for $800 million. It eventually ballooned to, a lot of reports say maybe 1.1, $1.2 billion. I mean, the company really, they dreamt big with this one. They had to get a number of corporate sponsors to even make it a reality. They wanted an authentic World Showcase. They had the countries themselves not only fund it, but staff it and give an authentic experience and representation of what those countries were. I mean, a lot of the stuff was just incredible. But there's a lot of great stories of development around it. For example, Tokyo, the Oriental Land Company, came knocking and said, hey, we want to do a Disneyland for Japan. And previously they were like, no, thank you. But when they really needed the money for Epcot, it was, maybe we take that up. And the Tokyo Disneyland, or Tokyo Disney Resort that we love and know today, wouldn't have been possible without Epcot. So that's an interesting thing.
It really is. And it makes you think that us as Disney fans, or even like diehard Disney fans, we see Epcot as a crown jewel. We see it as part of this rich history of Walt, a connection to Walt himself. But when you have I'm trying to think of how to put it. People that want to go to Disney, but they don't really know too much about Disney. It's just, oh, let's just go take the family for this once in a lifetime vacation. And it's like when they look at Epcot and they say, well, what really is there to do? There's not like a whole lot of rides. There's not a lot of, so people resonate to a vacation and a typical theme park or amusement park. I want to go on rides, so it's like, it means so much more for us diehard Disney fans, but for a typical normal vacation planning family, it's almost like Epcot was doomed to fail at the very beginning, because it already right then and there, it didn't have the identity that Magic Kingdom had, or even that Disneyland had, because there was a main focus to say, okay, this is supposed to be a theme park, where Epcot was never meant to be a theme park. So it already had that identity crisis to say, well, what can we fill in the void that can get people to come in here and enjoy themselves and spend a day ticket? But in all actuality, it wasn't supposed to be that.
Right, and you hit around the head there. I mean, it did kind of have an identity crisis going into it, and it really is unfortunate, right? I mean, this was this was kind of the first foray into, well, maybe not the first, but this was really the largest implementation of what we kind of know as edutainment, right? To educate the populace, and they even say this. The company was really fascinated with the idea of communicating very complex ideas using the theme park medium to do it. And really, that is Epcot personified, particularly Future World. And it was a lot of, okay, well, we need funding for these pavilions, obviously, but we really want to educate people about some of these more maybe abstract, esoteric, or complex subject matter. How do we do that in the theme park space? Some of those implemented well, and then others, you have some design limitations or mandates placed on by these corporations who are funding these that kind of alter that vision, and maybe some things maybe not work out as well as you originally envisioned. I think Spaceship Earth communication, I think that really did work. Others maybe, and this is the kind of tricky part, because that whole thing was, okay, there's going to be so many people coming to Epcot that we need all the capacity we can get. We need all the people eating that we can possibly muster. And unfortunately, that amounted to a lot of the attractions being slow moving omni-movers or boat rides. And unfortunately, that kind of set the tone for all of Epcot. And, sometimes it's like, hey, where's kind of the thrills? Where's the kind of the normal things that I would kind of find in a theme park? A lot of people are just like, hey, I want my brain here. I'll give it to you for I'll just take it out, give it to you for the next week, and I don't want to have to think about stuff. But this was really a park that was kind of born to make you think, make you consider, make you understand a lot of this stuff. And to some, that played really well. It captured the hearts and minds of an entire generation of kids and so forth. That wow, this was, it was inspirational in a way, but for others it was, it was a snooze fest. And that's, unfortunately, that's the reality. And it really is unfortunate, because Epcot was so ambitious. I mean, they just poured so much heart, love, soul into it. And unfortunately, a lot of that just it just wasn't understood in the time. And that's unfortunate.
Sounds like the lyrics for a good upcoming country song.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, just like what you said, I mean, starting out of the gate, you had Communicore, you had Horizons, you had the original West and East of the Interventions and everything, Living in the Land. And it's just like everyone was coming and kind of quoting back from what Marty Sklar was saying in an interview, that when people would eventually visit Epcot after coming from Magic Kingdom, all people were saying, well, this is just a permanent World's Fair. What is this? Right. Like, what are we? And he had to explain to people, no, it's much more than that. There's a lot of history and a lot of, deep, history back to what Epcot is really all about. And it wasn't until, through the 80s into the early 90s that Epcot had to kind of catch up with the time, because, people wanted thrill rides. People paid all this money to say, hey, I want thrill, I want excitement, and it's like, I'm not coming to Epcot to grab a pillow and a cot and take a nap. It's like, I want something to come out of this. And Disney kind of gave the fans what they wanted. They gave them Test Track, and then eventually became one of the most intense attractions ever made was Mission Space. And it's like, it started keeping the ball rolling, but it was also the fact that people were saying, we need more Disney in this Disney theme park. You know, where are the characters? Where is this and where's that? And I think, for me anyways, I think Disney kind of hesitated at that at first, was because they didn't want it to be that typical Disney theme park. They wanted Epcot to kind of stand alone for what it was meant to be, but being, again, that they didn't have Walt, they had to make what they could do at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and they had reached out to a lot of different what should I say, a lot of different maybe contributors or different professionals in certain areas and industries and so forth, looking for their opinions. And one of the things that was really profound was, you're going to be, one of the pieces of advice that they got was, you're going to be up against it because people have an idea, a preconceived notion going into this of what a Disney theme park should be and what they expect a Disney theme park should be, what they expect to see. And really, a lot of the design of Epcot was to redefine that notion, was to kind of, maybe not subvert your expectations, but at least change them and modify them to, okay, the Magic Kingdom is kind of a Disney theme park that you kind of know, but this is something completely new. And I don't think they never overcame that in the way that probably they should have. Which is really kind of unfortunate, because now it's like, okay, well, I'm in a Disney theme park. I mean, it's at a theme park on Disney property. I expect certain things to be there, and when they weren't, that kind of created issues. Like you said, I mean, people wanted thrill rides, people wanted, exciting adventures, people wanted story, people wanted the characters to see. And so now that we're going into this kind of new generation for Epcot, this kind of new iteration for it, which, by the way, I mean, the Imagineers have been kind of circling this wagon for a long time. Ever since the 90s, they've been kind of, okay, what are the deficiencies, at least from the point of view of our guests, of what Epcot is, and how do we overcome those? And so that's why, Bob Iger and Chapek start, that's where the mantra came from of kind of, kind of Disney but relevant, kind of those notions. It was to bring Epcot up to speed, but also infuse Disney in it. Can we do things that are true to Epcot's core values and mission, but do it in the Disney way? And that's kind of where it's all going. And there are people that are a fan of that, and there are people that are kind of like, don't mess with my Epcot. But it just it needs a new lease on life, and this is where it's going.
And that's actually true of actually what you are saying, because when I went down for the Millennium in 2000, I was 9 going on 10, and I just completely dated myself. That it was to the notion that when I went into Epcot, that was during the time where they had the meet and greets for the characters in their own countries, like where the storyline took place, where, you could visit Belle and Beast in France, you could visit Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in Germany, you can meet Aladdin and Jasmine in Morocco, so they were already starting to plant those seeds with incorporating Disney, but it's not like where they were throwing it in your face, where it's like very loud and very colorful, but they just kind of, subtleties, can sometimes be enough. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could just be, just enough. And then for me, it wasn't until that they announced at the D23 Expo, well, actually before the Expo, that they started with the theme parks. I would actually say with Animal Kingdom, when they had created Pandora, they wanted to create, and a place that people can go to extend their stay at Animal Kingdom. Then came the big overhaul at Hollywood Studios with Galaxy's Edge and Toy Story Land. But people were still saying, okay, that's great, we love it, but what about Epcot? It was like the second park that was made, and it's taking this long and nothing has been said. Well, then fast forwarding to the D23 Expo, everyone kind of had an idea they were going to announce something for Epcot. And boy, howdy did they. I mean, the whole presentation was basically for Epcot. It was, the announcement of Remy's Ratatouille Adventure at the France Pavilion, and an updated version for not Mission Space, excuse me, Spaceship Earth, and the Space 220 restaurant, and the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind roller coaster. I mean, they were just throwing everything on, and it was sort of kind of going back to that original kind of Epcot retro feel, like as far as like the look of it, where they were getting rid of the Leave a Legacy. I'm sorry, I'm just going to call them what they are to me. The Leave a Legacy tombstones that they had in front of the park. That, you know, you could actually, they were putting more greenery, more, you know, shrubbery, more trees, more benches, and kind of giving that organic nature feel to the park that, you know, can let the entrance of the park breathe a little. And then they announced, you know, that they were going to have multiple sections where it's going to be like the world of nature and world celebration, where they're going to have a building where you'd have a park up at the top to be able to have the festivals and what have you. And I mean, it was just amazing what the original concept was. And then 2020 came, and it just when we thought that Epcot was finally getting the love and respect and everything that we had to look forward to, everything just got put on hold. Everything just kind of, I don't even know, like the word you would call it, but it was just more of a hit to all of us, that it's like, okay, is this ever going to come to fruition? And it's like when Disney even couldn't give us the answers to say what was going to be greenlit and what wasn't. There was a period of time where it was like, okay, is Epcot ever going to get anything, or is it just going to stay like this for a very long time?
Oh boy. I mean, and to just mark how frustrating this is, folks, we got to go back to Epcot's history. When Epcot finally opened, when the dream was realized, it had trouble out of the gate. I mean, it was popular. It was, you know, quote unquote successful, but return visitation was very difficult. People kind of saw it and said, okay, I've done that, now something else. It had some deficiencies at the gate, and really the company had taken out so much, you know, debt. They kind of positioned themselves, just to bring it to life, they kind of positioned themselves in a kind of dangerous area, and that's when the green mailing happened and so forth. And you had, you know, angel investors kind of save them from that. A new corporate leadership was taking place. That's when Michael Eisner was made CEO, and one of the first charges he had was make Epcot work, and they really did try. They built out the area around it. They had the boardwalk and various resorts to kind of put a place and emphasis on Epcot and their future visions. They changed certain attractions, as you touched on already. You know, Ellen's Energy, you know, Universe of Energy by Exxon became Ellen's Energy Adventure. You had World of Motion become Test Track. You had different ideas poured into this to try to make it to kind of overcome those deficiencies and those areas. But really, the plan to remake Epcot even in the Eisner was far more ambitious than some of the kind of you know, redos of rides that we eventually saw. I mean, I had remember concepts hearing they were going to put a, you know, literally this was one of the concepts, put a roller coaster in Spaceship Earth. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that they were kind of thinking about, but really putting in more green space, putting in more lush landscapes that people could kind of navigate Epcot through, because as we know, it is kind of a hot park with all those swaths of concrete. So they had ideas of kind of remaking this park, you know, going all the way back then. But then, you know, the Eisner era becomes the Iger era, and you know, even Iger is like, hey, let's get this working. Let's make this work finally. But the plans to do it were so ambitious. They were so expensive. Again, you know, the company had already poured into, you know, probably $1.5 billion up at this point. That's going all the way back to the 1980s. I mean, it was an extremely expensive park to actually work on. You know, it's kind of interesting. Admiral Joe Fowler, you know, he was asked one time, hey, you know, what do you think about the Epcot project? And he's like, man, I told those guys not to build Epcot at the center of the resort as Walt envisioned, because there was a sinkhole problem. That's part of why it was so expensive to put anything on there. They would put monorail pylons, for example, in one day, come back the next, and they were gone. It's literally, they had sunk it all the way down. And that's what drove up the price for Epcot from the kind of 800 million or so to the 1.1 billion dollars it eventually became. And again, a lot of those design limitations and hardships had to be overcome with subsequent revisions, and that's part of what made Epcot so expensive, not only just to build but to actually to rework and so forth. And so finally, when the company is ready, when they have a great imagining team, when they have a really cohesive vision for neighborhoods and so forth, to kind of remake Future World into something that really works in the modern era under the kind of the modern Disney banner, the world collapses. And it's like, man, when does Epcot get a break? And it's really so unfortunate, and at the worst time too. This wasn't just, now we're gonna go, and before the bulldozers hit the concrete, this happens. No, in the middle of this very ambitious and expensive plan, this is what happens, and it's so unfortunate. I mean, we're fortunate enough that this happened before Spaceship Earth really was touched, because I mean, some of the plans would have altered those things dramatically. Unfortunately, the company had the sense to say, oh, well, we don't really know what's going on here. Let's just take a breather or two while we figure everything out. And then obviously the parks are shut down for months on end, in some cases a year, but that's another story. It really is unfortunate how this all worked out, and you just have these big ambitious plans, and then you're kind of faced with a dilemma. Well, it's so expensive, it's so ambitious. Do we necessarily want to put our company in a necessarily a bad position by trying to bring these to fruition into the realities that under the circumstances that existed before that don't exist now? It's very challenging, very difficult, very tough.
And I think it also depends on too what was actually being done with each in particular project at the time. Like if they would have already shut down Spaceship Earth and started the process while the shutdown happened, that would have been disastrous. That would have been, I can't even imagine what would have became of Spaceship Earth had that happened. On the other hand, that if they would have had possibly, timing wise, that if they would have had hypothetically Cherry Tree Lane already in development where they started building it, and also with the festival pavilion with the park on top of the building, if they would have had already started those projects, I think that they would have seen them all the way through. Just sort of like how they did with Remy's Ratatouille Adventure and Guardians of the Galaxy. I think had they not been already in the process of building those, where it was almost to the point of being done, and that even goes to the same token with Tron, that they got, all three of those attractions got delayed immensely. Yeah. But just to think that if they had not been started during the time of this worldly disaster, they may have been canceled altogether.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you bring up a good point. If had they been at different places in construction, maybe we would have seen some of the concepts come to fruition. Like you said, I mean, you do have attractions that were far enough along to where they are going to get completed, but some are going to be delayed outright until more cash flow comes in, like Tron. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is still moving forward, but this affects other areas too. Like, for example, the Harmonious Barges. The Harmonious Barges that people have taken issue with, to put it lightly. They were never meant to be permanently placed there. Throughout their entire development cycle, they were always meant to be positioned into place for showtime. That's why they're really unthemed in their current iteration. That's a final design element that was just never really, they were just never meant to be show ready, and you can see that. And those are the things you have to do when it's like, look, we just don't have the money to pull off some of these things in the way that we originally envisioned. Unfortunately, the kind of platform that they were going to construct out in Future World that they had destroyed half of Interventions or Communicore for. It's just like, oh, well, now we can't do that because we just don't have the money, and it's really unfortunate. You could have, you probably could have reused those buildings again and done that concept later, but you already destroyed it, and then the world collapses, and it's like, oh man, we're not far enough along to continue on these projects or bring them to fruition, but we're far along enough to really do severe damage to the park, and that's kind of where Epcot sits, and it's really unfortunate. Hopefully, with stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy, we can see those things come out in a timely fashion. I know the shooting schedules for when they are going to shoot the characters for that attraction, they've kind of been up in the air. They were really trying to get those character scenes shot for when the characters were in costume in Australia for Thor: Love and Thunder, but I think that fell through, so they have to kind of wait until I believe until Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is in production, which is going to be a little while. And then I mean, it's just so unfortunate. It's just really, really unfortunate what happened there.
Yeah, because everything kind of connects together. That you think, oh, well, these movies and these shows and these specials that were supposed to be in theaters and on Disney Plus and what have you, they got delayed. But because they kind of intertwine with these attractions, that just like you mentioned with Guardians of the Galaxy, because of all the shootings of the films and on locations got canceled or delayed or what have you, that's a big significant part for that attraction. So without those story scenes to involve those characters, you don't have an attraction. So
exactly. I mean, even Jungle Cruise was supposed to incorporate elements from the film, and those can't be incorporated now because the film hasn't been released, even though the Jungle Cruise redo is actually going through. So these things are interconnected. These things kind of, you kind of build up your systems in a way that don't really take account what we're going through right now. And when those systems fail in various ways, it affects other systems. So unfortunately, some of that has happened with Epcot as well. Thankfully, Spaceship Earth still, is still active. Thankfully, Epcot is still a place that can be navigated through, although it is very challenging right now because of just how much construction is taking place and how much destruction is taking place. Really, they still haven't gotten rid of the buildings to the point where, where they can take some of those walls down and so forth. So it's growing pains, folks. I mean, it really is tough. It really is a challenging time.
The last time that I was at Epcot, I think they just started the notion of like putting the construction walls up and everything, but I'm curious to see of what it's going to look like, because we're going to be taking our 2-week-long trip in July, and I'm curious to see what it's going to look like as far as like with the construction walls and like the detour ways to navigate through the park. I imagine it's going to look like sort of when you entered Disney California Adventure during the time when they had Buena Vista Street, and for Cars Land they had like, I mean, you were literally walking through almost like a 2x4, like a funnel vision, like when you were trying to get through, and it was sometimes a nightmare to try to, the bottleneck between crowds going in and out of the park. It was a nightmare.
Oh, that was a crazy process. I remember those days fondly. Eventually, they had to close off the entire entrance of the park. So, at a certain point, it was as soon as you got through the gates and scanned your ticket, you made a hard right, and you had to walk all the way down behind Soarin' and enter the park through a corridor between Soarin' over California at the time and the Grand Californian. And that's just how you had to enter the park, and you had to walk around this construction site that was building, stuff like Arthur Siddle Theater and otherwise. It was an extremely fascinating time, especially then because there was no real easy what they call kind of this construction umbilicus, which is how do you haul materials to the site in an active theme park when you're surrounding all sides with guests that are in the park at all times. How do you transport materials? How do you transport things are going to install and so forth. A similar scene is playing out in Epcot. Unfortunately, the middle of Future World is where a lot of this construction is currently happening. And how do you haul materials not just to the site but from the site when you're surrounding all four sides? It is extremely challenging. They get a little bit of leeway with the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind construction going on, so they can kind of have some traffic there. But it really is. It's how much cost do you want to dedicate to redoing this theme park right now is really the big question, right? Because the company has resources even right now to do anything within reason. I would have said anything just with no qualifier, but anything within reason. They just can't do everything, and they certainly can't do everything at once. So what is the kind of the most important things? And I think right now it's getting Harmonious up because they really severely need a nighttime show there. We touched a lot on Future World, but World Showcase is also being harmed right now because a lot of those World Showcase restaurants and a lot of the revenue streams that the park used to grab in simply aren't doing nearly the business that they used to. That used to be, Epcot kind of became the festival / where you eat park. That's kind of where it was. And they didn't want to mess up that, folks. That's why they were building the festival platform, was to make festivals a kind of permanent part of Epcot. And that's why Harmonious was approved, because the dining for Epcot is so important. But now, and they had kind of done it in a way, okay, well, we're never going to drain the lagoon. We're going to have shows that take place so we never lose that dining revenue stream at night. Those places they just sell out when a show is present, because people book dining just to see their show and eat, and it's a big part of it. Right now, they don't have a show in the middle of the lagoon, and as a result, a lot of those restaurants aren't doing nearly the business. Even at the 35% level, they aren't being nearly as saturated as they could be, and it's really, really hurting operations down there. So right now, it's like, look, we got to get Harmonious going, got to get Harmonious running. But let's be honest, those barges are hideous. Those barges are just like, oh my god, they're eyesores. But it's like, okay, well, how much do we dedicate to fixing those problems while also handling the problems we really do need to touch on? So it is really it's really fascinating. It's just this, you have all kind of forces stretching and grabbing Epcot at both ends, and it's just, something's got to give. It's going to be really interesting to see.
It really is, because even as you had mentioned with World Showcase, that not even just like with the dining and the nighttime show, but also the subtle entertainment that would be around World Showcase that would represent each country. You would have like the cast members, performing in their countries, like with at the Nine Dragons and in China, what have you, that the Mexico Pavilion, the mariachis, the acrobatics and everything. And it's like, when everything shut down, everything went with it. So it's like, it almost became where World Showcase, that whole entire section, as people would walk around, became a ghost town. And it was like, now they have to try to bring a pulse back to that. And I think the one thing that Epcot has going for it is, as you said, it's a park where it's like a festival / wine and dine type of flower and garden type of viewing type thing. So that allowed Epcot to say, hey, we could have some of these hard ticket events that doesn't necessarily have to involve high crowds, for like an entertainment portion. But now, as things are starting to open back up, crowds are starting to go in, they're going to have to need something as the park hours extend and what have you. And as you said, Harmonious needs to happen. And I remember seeing a few memes on social media that they were using the circular type of the barge, where they were having Doctor Strange look like he was making his multi-universe going through the portal. So it's like, it was like saying hashtag Disney's finally bringing Marvel to a Florida theme park at Disney. So it's like, but it's just one of those things where even with DCA, when you were first entering in the park with the construction, it was a hassle. But look what came of it with Buena Vista Street. And I just think with Epcot, as far as the construction goes, in the end, it will be timeless. It will be, a breathtaking view that when you walk in, it'll have like that Central Park type of feel that moves into Future World and then extends into World Showcase and the other neighborhoods around it as well. But kind of touching on the subject of with Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary, that everyone and their grandmother is going down probably on October 1st. And a lot of the theme park pass reservations are at Magic Kingdom, which is great. It was the first theme park to start off. But I really think, honestly, a huge significant part of the 50th should really more so revolve around Epcot. And even though there's a lot more to do right now at Magic Kingdom, I just think it's more appropriate for us Disney fans for the 50th anniversary that really Epcot should have that center spotlight than Magic Kingdom.
It really is unfortunate because that was the plan. The plan was to make Epcot a very much a big part of the 50th celebration. The idea was if we can get Tron, Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, and Ratatouille and Harmonious all in time for the 50th, that'll really bring a new energy and life to the park that people don't really associate with Epcot currently. And so that was going to be, it was a huge plan. It was a huge part of it. I don't know if they were going to get everything done by that time, but they were going to get a significant portion of it done by that time. And that would have really translated into a kind of a new identity for Epcot. Not only where it is, but where it was going. And that just all kind of fell by the wayside when you, like I said, when you have $25 billion worth of capital expenditure stretched out amongst one division all over the world. And when that, revenue stops flowing, you really had to make some hard decisions. And it really is challenging. There are things to be kind of happy about, though. I mean, World Showcase is World Showcase. It really, well, relative to the front of Epcot, relatively unscathed. There are some things going on in Morocco and some other challenges with cast not being able to come from the countries of origin to work those pavilions. But overall, it still does a healthy amount of business. And it's interesting to bring up the festivals because in Epcot's history, the festivals were, they kind of became more critically important to really boost the attendance of Epcot on an annual basis, get room reservations and so forth. And now they're really heavily relying upon them. That's why we haven't gone any days at all without a festival taking place this last almost year now, because they're critically important to getting people in there, even with all this construction going on. And they've been relatively successful at that. But it really is heartbreaking. There was really ambitious plans. Man, for years, all I heard was they're preparing for the 50th. Everything's going for the 50th. All of their energies and resources were dedicated on the 50th because they knew how successful it had been for Disneyland and for the company at large. And they celebrate.
And they were giving it to us. I mean, they really, Disney was delivering. I mean, it was like announcement after announcement, project after project. And I just thought, wow, when this is all said and done, Epcot is going to be massively different, but for the better. And I thought, this is what Epcot needed. And the one thing that I really hope, I am very excited for Ratatouille. I can't wait for Guardians. I can't wait to see Harmonious. But the one thing that I do hope that Disney does still follow through was one plan that they announced at the expo for Epcot. And it's very subtle. It's not even an attraction, so to speak, but I think it's something that needs to be done for Epcot. And that is the new statue of Walt Disney sitting down, looking out into the park. Yeah. And I just think that wouldn't be very costly at all. And I think that they could kind of squeeze that in the budget. And I really hope that if nothing else can become out of the change and the overhaul and the expansion of Epcot that it gets that statue.
From what I understand, that's still on the books. It's still going forward. Like you said, it doesn't cost that much, but it really is a kind of unifying notion to bring Walt into Epcot. It's critically important, not just to the kind of Imagineer's vision of what Epcot is and should be, but also this new kind of story-centric idea for Epcot going forward. I mean, it's critically important to that, and yeah, it is going forward to the best of my knowledge. I mean, I've reached out to see what's on the books, what's not on, and that's on from what I understand.
Good. I'm so glad, because I think after everything that Epcot has been through, everything that it's still going through, it still stands the test of time, and it's really a park that I think is like, no matter how hard they try, it's almost like Epcot is the middle child. It's like you have Magic Kingdom as the older sibling, and then you have Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom as the younger siblings. Well, the older sibling gets everything because it's the oldest, and then you have the two younger ones because they're the little ones, and then you have Epcot that's in the middle, and it's like I want a piece of that too. It's like
yeah, it was getting it, and it still is. A lot of the concepts are still on the table. A lot of it's still moving forward. It's just we're gonna have to wait a little bit. The old joke for Tomorrowland was the land that was going to be built tomorrow. And
yep.
Fortunately, Future World, well, it's going to be built in the future.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. It was another great conversation as always, and I look forward to future discussions with you. So thanks again for joining me.
Oh, absolutely. No problem at all. One last note, I wanted to update some viewers on some things for Toontown. It's interesting. We had that great Toontown discussion, and I just wanted to go ahead and kind of update y'all on it. For one, we would talk about the fireworks and how the fireworks, that might be an issue for Toontown. We all know that it closes early because of those and so forth, and operationally that could be really devastating if you have a new attraction there that you want to have everybody that goes there that day or as many people that day to ride it. Well, from what I understand, according to Alex the Historian on YouTube, what he's finding out is on the back of the Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway building, there is a new fireworks launch point going in on the edge of those buildings, and a new elevator to what he's saying to bring those pyrotechnics up and load them each night. And because of their positions, because of their placements, that might allow finally fireworks to take place in Toontown each night, or from the back of Toontown each night, but not actually mandate the land being closed. It is within what he's saying 150 feet from the guests' areas. So conceivably, they have already thought about these issues, which, Imagineering, they think of a lot of stuff. Of course they considered this notion, but they've already thought of this and have actually taken that into account with their designs going forward. So that is really, really good. That is really, 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 really nice.
So that basically answers my question that if Toontown is actually going to stay open longer than what it usually does, but so I guess that basically says that they will be open longer, even with the fireworks either going on either before or after it's done. So that's actually good to know. And especially with an attraction like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, that's going to be brand new. I seriously think that the fans are going to want it open as long as they possibly can get on it.
Absolutely. You only really, you have to saturate the hours of operation for your theme park or your attraction, right? You have to be able to get as many people through as possible with a new attraction, and the only way that can happen really is if you have that attraction open for the amount of hours that you have in the day for that theme park. So I think it's really, really great. I think it's really, really awesome. If that is true, if his reporting is true, check it out, folks. He has a Tomorrowland video where he goes into that, but that's a whole other story. It does seem sound. It does seem like his logic is applicable, and what he's saying is actually authentic. So that is really, really good news. The other thing was right now you can see the back of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge from Toontown, and some of the things that look unsightly
aren't really appealing.
yeah, I don't know for a fact that with the revisions coming to Toontown, at least the versions that we're getting post pandemic, of course. I don't know if they're going to take that into account, but from what I understand, I didn't really think about this, but from what I understand, any expansion would take that into account as well. So, maybe we'll see solutions to that too. I just wanted to kind of go ahead and give those two updates for fans, because I know Toontown was, we have a soft spot for it, just like we do with Epcot. So I really do appreciate you, George, for having me on. This has been great.
Absolutely. And thank you for that update, because I was very curious to know. And that actually makes me feel a whole lot better to know that, Disney's even thinking about these things, even us as fans that we, question it. It's like Disney may not fully confirm it with a full-on announcement, but just like very subtle things that they may say, hey, we're thinking about this too. But where could everyone find you?
Best place to find me is on Twitter, at VashSky. That's V as in Victor, ASHSKY. Best place to find me, interact with me. Well, I was going to be producing some content for Orange Go 55's channel soon, so keep on the lookout for that.
Awesome. And again, as always, thank you for coming on and having these in-depth conversations. I look forward to many more of them in the future. And
absolutely, sir. I love I love you having me on, and it's great to talk about, and great to get into it.
Awesome. Thank you again. And folks, as always, remember, stay healthy, stay safe, stay Disney. Bye, everybody.